Hi, my name is Anslem Paul. I have the privilege of serving as the Communications Director for the Regional Conference Retirement Program and the Office for Regional Conference Ministries here in Huntsville, Alabama, on the beautiful campus of Oakwood University. I want to share with you today a verse that comes out of the book of Psalms, chapter 121. It is a verse that many of us are familiar with. It says, "I will look unto the hills, from whence comes my help. My help comes from the Lord." Many of us, when we encounter this passage, we read it as if it is a single statement. Yet I would propose to you today that it is a statement, a question, and then a follow-up statement. The initial statement is, "I will look unto the hills." The question that follows it is, "From whence comes my help?" And then there is the answer to the question, "My help comes from the Lord." It is fascinating because many times we think that the text is saying that the psalmist believes that his help comes from the hills. He's saying, "No, bro, my help does not come from the hills." Notice the latter part of that verse. He says, "My help cometh from the Lord who made the heavens and the earth." In other words, he's saying that his help comes from a place that is bigger than just the hills. He's saying that my help comes from the Lord who made the space over the hill. My help comes from the Lord who made the space around the hills and who made everything under the hills. That's where my help comes from. But I want to focus on the third verse in that chapter, because oftentimes there are many of us who are already certain that our help comes from the Lord. We already know that there's nothing in the hills, that there's nothing in any other source but the Lord that provides the help that we need. But many times what we struggle with is the fact that what that help ought to look like. And so many times we think that our help is supposed to remove stuff and smooth stuff out. But I want to tell you a little bit about that next verse. He says, "He will not suffer your foot to be moved." He will not suffer your foot to be moved. At about the time that the psalmist was writing this passage, it's widely known that Jerusalem was at a very high elevation. And if you were approaching Jerusalem from almost any direction, you were going to have to climb a steep, rocky path. If you were not careful, you could fall, you could hurt yourself. I know that I'm getting older. There are some things that scare me now that didn't used to scare me at an earlier time in my life. One of the things that is scariest for me now as I'm getting a little older, and I'm sure if you're getting a little older, you know what this feels like. There's something about a fall that scares you more now as we advance in age. And maybe this was part of the audience that the psalmist was writing to when he says, "He will not allow your foot to be moved." Keep in mind what the psalmist is trying to get you to know and get me to know is that not only where does the help come from, but what that help looks like. In other words, what he's saying is, He will not suffer your foot to be moved as you climb this ascent towards the city. He's not saying that I'm going to move the mountain or that I'm going to smooth the path. What he's saying is I'm going to make sure that you have steady feet. He will not allow your foot to slip. He's saying that no matter what the circumstance you face, I'm not promising that I'm going to move the obstacle out of the way. I'm not promising that I'm going to make everything comfortable for you in every circumstance and situation that you're in. But what I will do is I will give you some steady feet. That ought to make somebody happy today, because you ought to know that even though you're in the midst of a bad circumstance, in the midst of a trial, in the midst of a bad financial situation, in the midst of a slippery slope when it comes to your health or to your finances, that you know that you serve a God who's able to give you steady feet. Sometimes we work very hard and we work endlessly and tirelessly to remove ourselves from bad circumstances and situations, and we just can't find a way out. But I'm so glad we can have the same assurance that the psalmist has, that He is able to steady our feet in the midst of bad circumstances. I will look unto the hills. I know that my help doesn't come from the hills. My help comes from the one who made the heavens and the earth, everything over the hill, everything around the hill, everything underneath the hill. That's where my help comes from. And I assure you today that that's where your help comes from too. God bless you.